People often confuse silence with weakness. They think that if you're not yelling, you're folding, that if you're not clapping back, you're giving up. But what they don't understand, what they overlook, is that silence, real silence, is not surrender, it's strategy. Because silence is not the absence of strength, it's the presence of control. It takes nothing to speak out of anger. Anyone can do that. Anyone can lose their cool when their ego gets poked, when their name gets dragged, when disrespect walks into the room. That's easy. That's human. But silence in that moment, that takes a different kind of strength. One that's built, not born. One that comes from doing the internal work. The emotional push-ups, the self-checks, the deep breathing instead of deep arguing. Let me say this plainly. Silence doesn't mean you didn't have something to say. It means you chose not to say it right there, right then. To the wrong person, in the wrong place, at the wrong time. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. You knew that the noise wouldn't serve you. You knew that proving your point in the moment might cost you your peace after. So you paused, you breathed, you chose to respond later or not at all. And that moment right there, that's where your power was. Silence gives you the room to rise above the situation. It's where you hear your own voice over the chaos. It's where you make decisions, not reactions. It's where you protect your peace without explaining why it matters. The loudest person in the room isn't the strongest. Often, they're the most insecure. They raise their voice because they don't know how to raise their standards. They shout because they don't know how to stand still. They feel small, so they make noise to look big. But silence, calm, confident silence, is a statement all by itself. It says, I'm not here to compete with your drama. I'm not giving you the reaction you're trying to steal from me. It says, I know who I am, and I don't need to prove it through volume. Think about the times in your life where you reacted out of anger. What came after? Guilt, regret, embarrassment. Most likely, yes. And not because you weren't justified in feeling what you felt, but because you gave someone else ownership of your emotions. You let their behavior pull you out of character. Now think about the times when you held your tongue, when you said less, or said nothing at all. Was it hard? Probably. But did it preserve your peace? Did it stop the situation from spiraling into something worse? Most likely, yes. Silence allows you to maintain control in a world that's constantly trying to pull you into chaos. It's not passive. It's powerful because it means you don't let people dictate how you show up. You don't let their volume turn into your vibration. And listen, I'm not saying silence is always the answer. Sometimes you need to speak. Sometimes you need to draw the line out loud. But when you choose silence, when you use it instead of defaulting to it, that's where it becomes wisdom. You're no longer reacting to the moment. You're responding to your values. Silence also exposes people. When you're not feeding their energy, they have nothing to fight. They end up arguing with themselves, looking loud while you look solid. And that's the kind of clarity you only get when you refuse to participate in chaos. So the next time someone tries to bait you into a reaction, remember this. Your silence might be the lewdest statement in the room. It says you don't need to stoop to be seen. It says you're not afraid to let your actions speak louder than your words. And most importantly, it says you've grown. Silence isn't weakness. It's the language of emotional maturity. It's the choice to preserve your power instead of wasting it. And the people who truly know their worth, they don't scream it, so they sit in it. So breathe in it. Hold it when it's hard, because in a world that shouts to prove strength, your silence might be the most undeniable proof that you're already strong. Respect is one of those words that people throw around often but rarely slow down to understand. We talk about earning it, demanding it, giving it. But here's what most people miss. The respect you show others has far more to do with you than it ever does with them. See, how you treat people, especially when they don't deserve your kindness, especially when they're pushing your buttons. That's the real measure of who you are, not who they are. Anyone can be polite as being polite. That's easy. But being respectful when someone's rude, that's character. That's discipline in the first place. That's self-respect showing up in action. Because how you treat others isn't about whether they've earned it in the first place. It's about whether you're going to let them pull you out of alignment with who you are. When someone disrespects you, they're handing you a choice. You can mirror their behavior or you can rise above it. You can join them in the mud, or you can stay in your lane with your peace intact. And let me be clear, this isn't about letting people walk all over you. This isn't about shrinking or staying silent. It's about choosing to lead with your values, even when it's hard. Because here's the truth: people will test you. They'll test your patience. They'll test your kindness. They'll confuse your calm for weakness. And in those moments, you'll be tempted to match energy, to clap back, to put them in their place. But what if I told you that putting them in their place doesn't require raising your voice or lowering your standards? What if I told you the real flex is staying composed while they lose control? Respect isn't something you give because someone deserves it. It's something you give because you've done the work to deserve of yourself. It takes strength to look someone in the eye who just disrespected you and respond with calm clarity instead of emotional chaos. It takes strength to say, I'm not going to speak to you the way you're speaking to me. That's not weakness in the first place. That's not letting them win. That's showing that you have boundaries and that you know how to hold them with grace. Because when you mirror someone's disrespect in the first place, you give them power over you. You allow their behavior to shape your response, and that means you're no longer choosing, you're reacting in the first place. You handed the wheel to someone who didn't even earn a seat. But when you stay rooted, when you treat someone with basic human decency even after they've shown you their worst, that's your reflection, not theirs. And don't get it twisted. Respect doesn't mean access. Doesn't mean you let toxic people stay in your life. It doesn't mean you don't hold people accountable. You can still walk away. You can still say no. You can still protect your peace. But you do it without bitterness, without vengeance, without becoming the very thing you're trying to avoid. That's the line between reaction and response, between ego and integrity, between impulse and wisdom. Because at the end of the day, you don't treat people right because they earned it. You treat people right because you've grown into someone who doesn't abandon their values under pressure. You don't show respect because it's easy. You show respect because it reflects your standard, because it says more about your emotional stability than it does about their behavior. Let me tell you something: anyone can argue. Anyone can shout. Anyone can be petty. But it takes emotional strength to pause, to process, to choose peace over proving a point. People remember how you made them feel, not just in the good moments, but especially in the hard ones. And how you carry yourself in those hard moments, that becomes your reputation. That becomes your energy. That becomes the room you create for yourself in a world that's constantly inviting you to react. So when someone disrespects you, don't ask, what do they deserve? Ask, who do I want to be right now? Because every response is a reflection. And when your reflection shows integrity, poise, and strength, you win. Whether they notice or not, you win. Because real respect always starts from within. There's something deeply unsettling to people when you don't give them the reaction they were expecting, especially when that reaction is rooted in chaos. They come at you loud, aggressive, sarcastic, waiting for a fight. They expect you to explode, to match their energy, to swing back just as hard. But then you don't. You stay calm, composed, and suddenly the room feels different, because dignity disarms when you hold your ground with grace. When you choose to respond instead of react, you take the weapon right out of their hands, not because you backed down, but because you stepped up. Most people are used to confrontation spiraling. They're used to the back and forth, the yelling, the accusations. That's the game they know how to play. That's the arena they're comfortable in. But when you show up differently, when you speak slowly, listen carefully, and respond intentionally, it throws everything off. They don't know how to handle someone who refuses to swing. And here's why that matters. So dignity isn't weakness. It's not submission. It's strategy. It's the art of knowing exactly who you are and refusing to let anyone else pull you out of alignment. Because if someone can make you act out of character, they're can first pull, they're controlling you. They're not just pushing your buttons, they're pushing your boundaries. But dignity is when you look them in the eye and say, without raising your voice, I won't let you decide who I become in this moment. That is power. That is presence. That is peace that doesn't flinch under pressure. People think disarming someone means overpowering them, outshouting them, winning the argument. But the truth is, the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to play the game, to take all that energy they're throwing at you and let it bounce right off your stillness in the place, because people don't know how to fight someone who won't fight dirty. And I'm not talking about being passive. I'm not talking about letting things slide or staying silent forever. I'm talking about choosing to respond with clarity and calm, choosing not to trade your dignity for temporary satisfaction, choosing to stay rooted in your values when someone else has clearly lost sight of theirs. It's easy to get caught up in the moment, to want to clap back, provoke, defend your name, but often when we rush to react, we end up saying things we can't take back. We end up fueling the very fire we wish would die out. Dignity doesn't feed fire. It smothers it quietly, powerfully. You ever notice how the strongest people in the room usually aren't the loudest? They're the ones who speak once clearly. And let that be enough. They don't waste words. They don't chase validation. They don't need to convince anyone of anything because they know who they are, and that knowing is louder than any outburst. In the first place, that's what dignity sounds like. It's not showy, it's steady. It doesn't need to prove. It just is. And when you lead with dignity, you give the other person a choice too. They can rise to meet your level, or they can look foolish trying to fight someone who's not fighting back. Either way, you stay untouched. You stay unbothered. You stay in control. Dignity reminds people that they don't get to dictate your behavior, that their chaos doesn't call the shots, that even when they come at you sideways, you have the strength to stand tall. Let me tell you something real. The moment you realize you don't owe anyone a reaction is the moment you get your power back, not because you're afraid to confront, but because you've learned the value of conserving your energy, of protecting your peace, of choosing wisdom over war. So the next time someone tries to bait you into an argument, the next time they raise their voice, roll their eyes, cross that line up, just remember, you don't have to match their energy to protect your own. You can pause, you can breathe, you can speak once and walk away if needed, because when you carry yourself with dignity, people feel it. They may not say it, but they notice. It unsettles their ego. It exposes their immaturity. And it reminds them loud and clear that not everything deserves your energy. Dignity disarms every time. When someone crosses the line, your first instinct might be to raise your voice, to fire back, to make sure they know they were out of line. That reaction, it's natural, it's human. But here's the truth: outbursts may feel powerful in the moment, but they rarely change anything. They don't create clarity, they create noise. And noise doesn't earn you respect. Boundaries do. Boundaries speak louder than outbursts ever will, because a boundary, when communicated calmly and clearly, doesn't just demand respect, it teaches it. You're no longer reacting to chaos, you're creating structure. You're not looking for attention. You're asserting value. You're showing others how you expect to be treated without needing to raise your voice to be heard. Outbursts often come from a place of being unheard for too long. We let things slide. We stay quiet when something bothers us. We smile through discomfort. We hope people get the hint. But when they don't, it builds. And then one day, we explode. Not because we're bad people, but because we ignored our boundaries until we couldn't anymore. But here's what growth looks like: not waiting until the breaking point to speak. Setting the boundary early, with clarity, calm, without guilt. That's maturity. It's easy to yell. It's easy to go off on someone who crossed the line. But what's harder and far more powerful is saying, "Hey, I don't accept being spoken to like that. If it continues, I'll have to walk away from this conversation." That's a boundary, and it leaves no room for confusion. It doesn't require aggression, just intention. When you know your worth, you don't scream it, you state it. You don't beg for respect. You build the conditions where respect can grow. And if someone chooses not to honor that, you don't fight harder. You step back. That's what boundaries allow you to do. And listen, some people get uncomfortable when you start setting boundaries, especially the ones who benefited from you not having any. They may call you cold, distant, overreactive, but that's not on you. That's their discomfort speaking, not truth, because people who respect you will respect your boundary. No explanation needed. You don't need to justify protecting your peace. You don't need to argue for your own space. You don't need to defend your emotional safety. You just need to stand in it. Boundaries say, "I value myself enough to walk away from what doesn't." They say, "This is where I end and you begin." They say, I won't let your chaos become my character. And that message is far more effective than any outburst you could ever deliver. Here's the difference, Sag. An outburst makes you feel powerful for a moment. A boundary makes you be powerful in the long run. One is reaction. The other is regulation. One might silence the moment. The other reshapes the relationship. Because when you start living with boundaries, people adjust or they exit, and either outcome is a win. Either way, you're creating space for peace, for clarity, for emotional safety, not just for you, but for every relationship you're in. Boundaries are not walls, they're doors. They're how people learn to engage with you. They guide the tone, the pace, the level of intimacy. And when clearly defined, they remove the need for explosions. In the first place, you don't need to scream when your life is structured around what you will and will not tolerate. You don't need to yell to protect your peace. You don't need to threaten to be taken seriously. You don't need to react loudly to prove you're not okay. All you need is a clear boundary and the strength to uphold it. So next time someone pushes past your limit, don't explode. Don't prove your point through volume. Pause, breathe, speak, set the line. And if they can't honor it, walk away, not with anger, but with confidence, because that boundary, it already said everything that needed to be said. In the end, people hear your outbursts, but they respect your boundaries. Let your calm speak louder than your chaos. Let your firmness speak louder than your frustration. Let your boundaries do the talking, because they say more about your worth than any argument ever could.